I'm Victoria Hale, 34, the daughter who was always told she was almost enough living in Manhattan now, with a life my family never believed I could build. At home, my sister Madison was the jewel, the chosen one, every trophy polished for her, every word of praise rehearsed in her direction, while I was left with the question that never changed: why not first, Victoria? Why not better? Yesterday, an envelope arrived, embossed and heavy, inviting me to Madison's engagement dinner. My name printed wrong, once again, Veronica, as though I had never truly existed to them, ever been erased by the very people meant to see you. Hit like if you've ever been overlooked in your own family, and comment if someone else always got the applause. It started with that invitation lying in my hand like a dare I couldn't ignore. I sat by the window, amber light pouring across the glass and steel of Manhattan, the skyline cut into slabs of fire by the November sunset. I turned the card in my hands like an artifact dug up from a world that never belonged to me. Veronica Hale. They still couldn't get my name right. My own mother must have dictated it, or my sister had typed it without a glance. Veronica, like I, had been an administrative error in the family ledger from birth. The sting was familiar, worn smooth, like a scar rubbed again and again. A memory bled through before I could stop it. I was 9, standing in the family parlor clutching a silver medal for the city's Young Artists Showcase. My sketch of Old Oak's crumbling porch had earned me second place. Margaret's voice had been sharp, dismissive. Why not first, Victoria? Do you think life rewards? Second Madison had smirked from the arm of the sofa already adorned in her ballet ribbons. That moment calcified into a kind of marrow in me, hardening each time I was reminded of my role, the girl who almost made it, the daughter who never was enough. I placed the card down on the table beside me, next to the worn leather notebook that had become my anchor through years of silence. Its spine was frayed edges scarred with ink, where I had drafted plans, logged flights, jotted the motto that kept me alive: if they won't give you a chair, build one. That line had started as a whisper to myself in dorm rooms and airport lounges, then became a mantra, the skeleton of everything I built when no one else believed I could. But still, the invitation hummed like a live wire. Madison's engagement dinner. I pictured the room before I had even decided, Margaret at the head of the table, wineglass, tilted just enough to catch the chandelier. Madison glowing, rehearsing her role as the jewel of the family, uncles and cousins leaning in to toast the perfect union. I was not supposed to be there. I had been erased long ago like a misprint in their perfect narrative. Yet part of me ached to walk into that room, to stand among them, not as Veronica, not as second best, but as the one they had underestimated. Another part of me, the scarred part, whispered to stay away, to guard the peace I had built brick by brick without them. The quiet of my apartment pressed in on me as I weighed the choice. The city outside kept moving, indifferent to my dilemma, taxis streaking gold below, horns pulsing through the glass. I reached for the notebook, brushed my fingers along the leather edge, and then set the card down beside it as though pairing two pieces of evidence. My hand lingered there, suspended between past and present. And that was when the decision tilted, not with fireworks or fanfare, but with the simple gravity of a gesture. Laptop screen reflects a G800 under hanger lights. They called it unemployment. I called it equity pending. Midtown wakes like a careful machine, steam curling from the street grates, trucks unloading flour and crates of greens, 1,000 private rituals wrapped inside a single public rhythm. I take a corner table in a cafe that never asks questions. The staff here know how to leave a person. Her silence, a mug, a refill, a nod that means, "We see you. We won't pry." Morning light slips through the glass in long bands, striping the wood with pale gold. I set my notebook down and let the city settle around me. Failure doesn't arrive with brass bands. Mine came on a Tuesday, with a burn rate spreadsheet that refused to blink first, and a partner who couldn't watch another week evaporate. We shut the doors quietly. I carried the servers out myself because it felt indecent to let strangers touch them. People later called that period my gap, the blank between the lines they recited about Madison at holidays. Gap as if I'd fallen through a crack. But I remember it as a hinge, the place where something turned. A friend slid a key into my palm the night after we closed. "Couch is yours," she said, already apologizing for the lumpy cushions and the street noise and the single bathroom. I slept there like a fugitive and woke there like a monk pared down to bone and focus. The first gig came from a founder with a product that was almost right and a runway that was almost gone. I traded hours for 3%, then rewired his onboarding, resequenced his roadmap, and taught his team to track the problem instead of the praise. When the acquisition finally came a year later, the check was modest in public terms and seismic in mine. I cut it directly down the spine, half for rent and groceries, half for the seed of a life I could grow without permission. The cafe clinks and murmurs around me, milk steaming plates knocking a barista calling out names that don't quite match the cups. I keep my head bent and let anonymity work like cover. Privacy over applause, prize leverage, not headlines. It would have pleased the old version of me to compose an announcement to pin it to the places my family might glance. But public victory is hard to eat. I learn to eat quietly. I open a stack of files, risk memos, diligence notes, the drafts of other people's dreams. The world thinks in slogans, value hides in footnotes. I read the caveats and the line items that no one mentions at launch parties. Carrier constraints, customs choke points, recourse terms that rot the minute a market sneezes. I run my pen down the margins and make the little notations that mean watch, wait, move. Deals don't reward the loudest voice. They reward the first person to notice what isn't being said. Someone knocks lightly on my table. I look up and see the friend whose couch saved me. She looks expensive now, and tired in a way money can't fix. We hug the way people do when a decade fits into 10 seconds. "You good?" she asks, scanning for fractures. "Better than I've ever been," I say, and leave it there. She doesn't press. That's the contract between us, hospitality without interrogation. She taps the table twice, a blessing, and leaves with a coffee, to go, and a meeting already late. I turn back to the page. The map of the last few years resolves like a held breath, small stakes compounding a portfolio built out of overlooked efficiencies and unglamorous wins boardrooms that learned my name without requiring my presence. The work feels like carpentry measure, twice cut, once sand, until the grain shows. Somewhere, a podcast is playing at the counter, two hosts laughing about founder myths. I ignore them and follow the numbers instead. The acquisition check sits in memory the way a coin sits on the tongue, metallic, specific. I can still feel the rib of the envelope where I split the money into two accounts. Survival and seed. The survival bought me time. The seed bought me choice. Choice looks like early flights and late nights and a calendar you don't have to apologize for. It looks like saying no to deals that taste sweet and rot fast. It looks like not attending a dinner for 3 years because the cost of the invitation is your dignity. I sketch out a simple schedule for tomorrow, a column that runs from dark to dawn. The hangar needs notice. The crew needs a heads up if I want to be wheels up before the city remembers its own name. New York stretches outside the windows. Taxis flash a siren size somewhere uptown, and the cafe door breathes in cold commuters who thaw near the pastry case. I keep my face down, a ghost among daylight citizens, and study the one-page brief for a fund whose partners prefer to be seen at galas rather than warehouses. Their optics are good, their exposure is worse. I mark a line next to the covenant breach no one else circled. The phone buzzes once with a settlement confirmation, the kind of ping that used to set my pulse racing. I silence it and take the slow victory, a sip of cooling coffee, a margin note done right. I don't need to post a thing. I don't need anyone to clap. When the cafe thins, I make the call that matters. The line connects to a voice I know by timbre and calm. We speak in short phrases the way people do when trust has been earned by years, not favors. I don't say where I'm going or why. I don't have to. All I authorize is logistics, timing, fuel crew, a cabin stocked for work rather than celebration. No champagne, no photos. Outside, a delivery truck sighs, inside plates stack, and the counter gets wiped to a wet shine. I close the notebook and slide the pen into the spine, leaving the page marked where it needs to be when I reopen it. I thank the barista with a nod and a tip I don't announce. Quiet, always quiet. The city will never applaud you for choosing substance over performance. You have to applaud yourself by building something that holds. I end the call, and the world feels arranged into clean lines again. Task sequenced movement set in motion tomorrow, given a runway without fanfare. I step out into the breath cloud air and let the crowd fold around me as if I'd always belonged to this river of strangers. In the pocket of my coat, the phone vibrates once more, a single beat of sound in the winter morning. Text pops: North Valley ready at 0600. 2 ways to arrive at a dinner taxi or the wings you built yourself. The terminal at North Valley sits in its own silence, the kind you can hear through the hum of sodium lamps and the faint hiss of hydraulics working somewhere unseen. It is barely dawn sky, still slate runway lights pulsing like a steady heartbeat beyond the glass. I walk across the tarmac with my coat zipped high and my breath scattering into the November air. The hangar doors are already open, the G800 gleaming as if it had been waiting for me alone. The quiet of this place is nothing like Manhattan's cafe chatter. It feels earned, like a sanctuary carved from velocity. The line tech offers a clipboard and a nod. We exchange no unnecessary words. I move through the walk-around as if it were a ritual. Flaps, seals, lights, tires, the kind of scrutiny that once applied only to my own failures. My father's voice drifts through memory. You'll never sit at the adults' table, and I almost laugh, circling the fuselage of my own answer. His baritone meant to diminish me has turned into the drumbeat against which I measure each victory. Every checked component feels like a rebuttal written in steel and composite. Inside the cabin waits in half-light. A chilled bottle of champagne sits in a silver bucket on the console, a default indulgence. I lift it once, glance at the label, and set it back with finality. Coffee, I say. The captain nods. A moment later, the scent of black coffee fills the pressurized air. I like it unadorned, burnt bitter, the taste of vigilance. Celebration belongs to people who need to be seen celebrating. I prefer momentum. The captain uniform pressed even in the gray hour briefs me with professional precision. Weather is clear, flight time to Chicago just under 2 hours, winds cooperative. He asks if I'd like the cabin blinds adjusted. I shake my head. Let the city lights shrink away naturally. The line tech signs off on the fueling. Paper passes from one hand to another. Nothing flashy, nothing that begs to be noticed. This jet is not a stage. It's a tool, a chair I built when no one thought I deserved one. Before we taxi, I pull out my phone. A single call routes through a secure line. On the other end, a paralegal at Whitmore and Alder confirms the board packet is filed, time-stamped, and in the inboxes of people who will wake to find it waiting. The documents carry my fingerprints in every margin, every clause. The firm will never know how much weight is stacked on those pages, but I do. I thank them curtly and end the call before they can say more. Words are currency. I spend them carefully. Checklist complete. The cockpit waits for my mark. The logbook rests open on the tray pen clipped to the margin. I hold it steady hand poised in the narrow glow of an overhead lamp. This signature means more than legal possession. It is the visible stroke of years spent eating failure in silence, of splitting checks in half so survival could coexist with seed. My name travels in dark ink across pale paper, Victoria Hale owner. No title could equal that clarity. No round of applause could weigh as much. The captain acknowledges with a slight lift of the brow, then returns to his instruments. The engines spool a low thunder muffled by insulation yet felt in the bones. The cabin trembles lightly as we taxi to the line. Outside the horizon bleeds faint silver. I take the coffee in my hand and sip once, grounding myself as the aircraft positions. For a moment, the world narrows to a single inhale, a single exhale, the deep patience before momentum. The nose lifts. Chicago awaits. We tiled this threshold with my father. They resurfaced it to erase me. The rental car's engine clicks as it cools, parked beneath the line of bare oaks that once shaded my childhood summers. Dusk lowers itself gently over the neighborhood, tinting the manicured lawns in violet shadow. Old Oak, our house, though no one here would admit it, now stands with its windows lit in soft gold, dressed as if for a magazine shoot. From the street, it looks flawless, curated, as though grief and fights and whispered promises had never lived within its walls. The hedges are clipped into symmetrical cubes. Lanterns glow in pairs by the door. Everything looks balanced except for the weight in my chest. I step out into the chill and let my eyes travel across the front. A small army of staff moves like choreography inside a florist, setting roses at perfect angles, a caterer in black slacks, balancing trays that glint beneath the chandeliers, a woman in pressed white folding napkins into shapes that look too precise to be used. They're staging casual elegance, rehearsing a fiction for arriving guests. The sight should sting. Instead, it feels hollow, as if I'm watching strangers borrow my memories for decor. The walkway is new stone aligned with clinical accuracy. My father and I once crouched here with mortar on our hands, laughing as we tried to balance the third brick that sat stubbornly 2 millimeters off. That misaligned edge became our secret landmark, a private truth only he and I noticed each time we stepped across. Now the path is even, flawless, a betrayal, masquerading as progress. I tighten my grip on the invitation card in my hand, their error in spelling my name Veronica instead of Victoria, and walk forward anyway. The door opens before I can knock. A young server, pressed vest hair pinned too tightly, meets me with rehearsed politeness that falters at recognition. Mrs. Hale said, "You weren't expected." The sentence lands like a rehearsed excuse, as though he's been warned I might appear and instructed to manage it quickly. His eyes dart to the gold-trimmed envelope I hold. I let silence stretch, then present the card. The raised letters catch the porch light, embossed with dignity meant to exclude me. I was invited. I say my voice, even leaving no room for doubt. The pause is long enough for me to hear muffled voices from deeper inside, clinks of cutlery, a piano chord struck for ambiance. The server hesitates once more, then nods with the quick obedience of someone afraid of making the wrong call. He pulls the door wider. Crossing the threshold, I slow deliberately. My shoes press against the stone they've laid over history, each step tracing what used to be crooked. The alignment under my feet feels wrong, soulless, like walking on a lie. My father's laughter is still buried beneath the mortar, invisible now but not gone. To them, erasure is restoration. To me, it's theft. The entry hall smells of polished wood and citrus cleaner. Photographs that once told our story. Birthday cakes, trophies my mother's garden are absent. In their place are neutral landscapes, generic art chosen for color palette, not sentiment. My reflection shivers across the gloss of the new hardwood floor, as though even the house questions my presence. The server disappears with a bow of the head, leaving me alone in the vestibule. I let my eyes lift to the eaves. Nestled in shadow above the porch is a discreet dome, the security camera I had installed years ago when I still held power here. Papers prove it remains my legal property, though I doubt anyone inside remembers or cares. Its quiet lens observes me now, impartial witness to a return they tried to deny. I pause, fingertips grazing the banister, grounding myself. Every surface gleams with curated elegance, every corner whispers of their attempt to overwrite me. Yet under the polish, the house still remembers who first gave it warmth. My presence here is not intrusion, it's reclamation. Then it arrives, sharp as glass breaking, smooth as silk spilling. A crystal laugh ripples from the dining room. No one offered me a seat. The last chair offered itself. The long dining table stretched beneath chandeliers that glowed with deliberate warmth, their crystals scattering light across the polished wood like an expensive mirage. 20 seats had been arranged with mathematical symmetry, silver cutlery, aligned as if a ruler had drawn the angles. The air smelled faintly of lilies and roasted meat, a fragrance curated for sophistication, though to me it masked desperation. I hovered at the threshold just long enough for heads to turn, the momentary hush serving as my introduction. A chair at the far end, unclaimed and slightly offset, seemed to tilt its backrest toward me like a conspirator. It was not placed by their invitation, it had been left out of necessity or oversight, but it called to me with quiet defiance. I walked to it without hesitation, dress brushing against the aisle, heels striking cadence on the floorboards. If no one dared acknowledge my presence, the chair would. I sat, sliding the misspelled invitation from my clutch and resting it beside the plate like a badge of composure. Veronica Hale, their fiction. Victoria Hale, the truth, that burned just beneath the gilt letters. Margaret stood near the head of the table, glass, lifted posture crisp with the fragility of someone who longed to impress. Her smile glimmered, but her knuckles tightened around the stem. To Madison and Grant she declared, her voice carefully pitched to Carrie, to the promise of a luminous future. She let the syllables stretch, and in doing so skipped deliberately over my name. There was no stumble, no accident. A mother's omission is colder than a stranger's insult. The family chorus responded on cue, glasses lifted, smiles broad. Crystal rang against crystal, filling the air with a sound that pretended harmony. Madison shone under the attention, her hair gleaming like spun glass, her smile a practiced performance of generosity. She turned slightly toward me, head inclined, and offered a remark with the softness of silk concealing scissors. Some of us choose stable careers, Victoria. Others prefer to wander. Her tone invited laughter, but only a few dared accept their chuckles, small, nervous, betraying the uncertainty of whether the jab was permitted. I placed my hand lightly on the tablecloth, tracing its embroidered edge. The chair did not creak beneath me. It supported me as though carved for this exact moment. My expression remained composed, eyes steady, neither rising to take the bait, nor dipping to avoid it. Years ago, I would have answered fire with fire, but scars had taught me the sharper edge of silence. The invitation at my plate caught the chandelier's light, its wrong name gleaming like a counterfeit jewel. Grant Whitmore sat across from me, posture easy but eyes too attentive. He was not family, not yet, though the ring on Madison's finger tried to bind him. He sipped his wine slowly, watching the invisible currents in the room. His gaze flickered to me when Madison's words fell, measuring the silence that followed. He noticed how laughter diminished into awkward coughs, how Margaret's fingers tapped her glass stem a second too long, how my quiet resistance shifted the balance without a syllable spoken. The courses arrived in procession, servers gliding between us like shadows. I lifted fork and knife with the same deliberation I brought to boardrooms, each motion precise, rehearsed. Madison leaned into her fiancé, whispering with a sweetness meant to exclude. Margaret's smile never faltered, though her eyes darted down the table, checking for cracks in the tableau she had engineered. Conversation swelled, then ebbed, a tide, orchestrated to highlight Madison's triumphs, Grant's credentials, Margaret's hospitality. My own history was conveniently invisible, as though the chair I occupied belonged to a ghost. But the longer I sat, the more my silence grew dense, undeniable. Even without words, my presence disrupted the script. Madison's voice sharpened once more, this time under the veil of kindness. You've always had such resilience, Victoria. I suppose not everyone can find fulfillment in a traditional path. The subtext dripped sweetened poison offered as praise. I lifted my glass, letting the amber liquid catch the light. My eyes found hers, held them steady, calm as still water hiding depth. I did not blink, did not flinch, did not break the silence that now bound us. The table's chatter thinned, sensing the current. The chandelier hum seemed louder, the clink of a fork against porcelain sharper. Margaret shifted her smile, straining into rigidity. Grant's hand resting lightly on the table curled once, then flattened. I answered the barb with nothing but a steady look, a mirror polished so finely it reflected Madison's intention back onto herself. Tension climbed the air like a violin string tightened past safety. Around us, family members studied their plates with the exaggerated focus of people afraid to witness history. Across from me, Grant's brow knit. The question hovered in his expression, unformed but insistent like a storm cloud gathering shape. He opened his mouth slightly, then closed it, not ready to ask yet. Their laughter rang sharp like crystal, waiting for a crack. The dining room had settled into its rhythm courses, arriving in stately sequenced silver forks, chiming faintly against porcelain. The lamb roast, glistening with rosemary and butter, was placed in the center like a prize, its scent designed to wrap the room in wealth and comfort. But beneath the chandeliers, the laughter was sharper than any knife at the table, each ripple cutting along edges of status and suggestion. I sat still, posture straight, letting the sound wash over me. To anyone else, it was the natural music of family gathered for celebration. To me, it rang like warning glass, brittle, dangerous, the kind that shatters with the lightest tap. The long table gleamed under crystal and candlelight, a stage more than a meal. The roast was carved portions passed down with polite murmurs. Margaret's voice, smooth as lacquer, floated above it all. Madison has always been so grounded, she said, turning toward her younger daughter with a smile too practiced to be spontaneous. A stable career, a vision that aligns with her future household. Really, it's something to admire. The words were coated with affection, but their trajectory pointed at me. Madison's nod of gratitude was perfumed with triumph, her dress catching the chandelier's glow like a deliberate weapon. She flaunted its designer with casual mentions, pausing so relatives could inquire. Uncle Charles and Aunt Diane leaned forward, eager to participate in the chorus. "You wear it well," Madison Diane murmured, clapping softly against the stem of her glass. Cousin Olivia, half hidden by her curls, stared at me with a mix of curiosity and discomfort caught between the glitter of the favored daughter and the shadow I occupied. I reached for my glass, fingers steady, and placed it back down with a deliberate pause. Beside it, almost in the same motion, I laid a small brass key onto the white linen. Its surface caught a shard of light, faint but unmistakable. Most eyes slid past it, dismissing it as an ornament or a trinket, but not Grant's. Across the table, his gaze flickered, caught, and lingered. He did not ask, "Not yet," but I saw the brief contraction at his brow, the quiet recognition of something out of place. Madison continued, her voice gathering the table's attention like a conductor lifting a baton. "I've been approached for a new role," she said, smile bright and brittle. "Something with the fund naturally, the kind of position that secures influence." Her hand grazed the diamond on her finger as if to punctuate her statement, as though her achievements and her engagement ring were cut from the same stone. Laughter bubbled in response, the clinking sound of glasses punctuating her performance. Margaret joined laughter, pitched higher, sharper, carrying pride, as though it were proof of success. I felt the echo of my father's hand steadying bricks at Old Oak, the crooked step we had left imperfect on purpose, and I pressed my palm against my lap beneath the tablecloth. Their voices rang in layers, echoing off chandeliers, sharper than knives, glinting with malice they dared not call by name. The lamb was sliced juices running onto porcelain. Madison's fork touched the meat as her smile widened. Maybe she said with a smirk that needed no translation, "I'll get you a receptionist role at the fund someday. Something stable. Something suited." The words floated sweetly, their cruelty hidden beneath silk. A few relatives chuckled, tentative, unsure of the line between humor and insult. Margaret's lips pressed into a smile too wide to be genuine, the satisfaction of a mother whose favored child had struck perfectly. I kept my eyes steady, silence my armor. I did not let the chair creak, did not lift my chin or drop it. I let the key lie there beside my glass unremarked, glowing faintly as though waiting to be discovered. The silence stretched too long for comfort, bending the room's air. Grant shifted in his seat. His fork paused midway to his plate eyes, not on Madison, not on Margaret, but on me, and then lower to the brass key that lay with quiet defiance on the linen. His gaze flickered unsettled, as though he had just witnessed a code written in plain sight, one only he had chosen to read. At this table, knives don't cut meat, they cut people politely. The entree had just been set down, plates glazed with the dark gloss of reduction sauce, the roast lamb softened into pale slices. Bordeaux was poured with practiced elegance, the crimson liquid catching the light, as though even wine understood the hierarchy of this room. Glasses lifted, chins tilted, and conversation turned sharper, circling the long table like predators circling in daylight. I felt the pattern forming, the way each course seemed less about food and more about the ritual of positioning. Madison sat radiant, recounting her upcoming fund roll again, her hand grazing the diamond with a calculated casualness. Margaret punctuated the story with proud sighs, her voice projecting toward the older relatives, who nodded dutifully, their agreement rehearsed. Then came Olivia, her chin resting lightly in her palm, eyes glinting with the energy of someone who relished polite combat. "So?" she began, tone sweet, but sharpened by curiosity. "What are you doing these days, Victoria?" The pause she left afterward was deliberate bait hanging in the air, designed to draw blood under the guise of familial interest. I let the question hover, prepared to answer in measured tones. But Margaret was quicker, as though she had rehearsed the line in her head long before Olivia posed it. "She calls it creative consulting," Margaret said, smile polished fork, sliding through lamb with effortless grace. "We call it unemployment." Laughter skittered around the table like glass marbles, polite, complicit, their edges smooth enough to pass as civility. I lifted my glass, slowly swirling the Bordeaux, giving myself the span of a breath to measure tone and timing. "I've been spending some time working with Delaware structures," I said lightly, voice even the kind of phrase that could pass unnoticed by most ears. But it didn't pass unnoticed by all. Across the table, Grant's body stilled. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, his hand pausing on the stem of his glass. Olivia blinked, confused, already drifting back to her plate. Madison smirked, uninterested in technicalities she thought beneath her. But Grant leaned in the movement, so subtle it barely disturbed the air. His voice was low, intended only for me, a question edged in code. "Delaware statutory?" he asked softly, "or revocable?" It was not the kind of question one asked at a family dinner. It was the kind of question that revealed knowledge, insider fluency, and awareness of worlds layered beneath the surface of casual insults and polite laughter. The words carried weight, a recognition wrapped in discretion. I let the silence stretch a heartbeat too long, then met his eyes over the rim of my glass. He held the gaze steadily, searching the flicker of calculation behind his expression, unmistakable. My lips curved the faintest fraction, not enough for the others to notice. "What do you think?" I asked, voice smooth, letting the ambiguity settle between us like a hidden card revealed just enough to shift the game. "Some see failure, others see a runway." The clatter of silver eased as servers glided in to clear plates, a lull descending between courses that left the table suspended in brittle silence. Crystal stems shifted, knives aligned just so, and conversation dropped into murmurs scattered along the 20-seat stretch. It was in those in-between moments when no toast was being raised, when no story demanded center stage, that truth had room to leak. Grant leaned back slightly, one elbow resting near his wine, his expression measured. His voice came quiet, not meant to travel far. I was at North Valley last week. Saw a G800 prepping pre-dawn. Tail number started VH. Unusual for local registration. His gaze lingered, pointed but careful, as though the observation itself was a kind of chess move laid on the board. I let my fingertips trace the edge of my glass. Letters can be shorthand for many things, I said, evenly tone, somewhere between casual and evasive. The answer was neither denial nor confirmation, just enough ambiguity to feed curiosity without granting satisfaction. Before silence could expand, Madison leaned in with the energy of someone determined never to be eclipsed. Speaking of shorthand, she cut brightly, her voice riding over mine. I'm joining Whitmore and Alder soon. They don't just hire anyone, they recognize real talent. I'll be leading on fund structuring before long. She flashed a smile meant to dazzle the relatives, to remind them of where the Hale family's favor currently rested. I tilted my head, feigning interest, then asked in a tone almost naive, "That fund? Isn't it planning to acquire Old Oak?" The words floated into the quiet like smoke curling into every ear within reach. Forks paused. Eyes flickered. Old Oak, our house. Our history, supposedly just family property, sounded suddenly transactional. The phrase acquire belonged to balance sheets, not hearths. Grant's reaction was instantaneous. His shoulders tensed, his brow etched a crease, and his hand stopped mid-motion with the wineglass. "That's pipeline intel," he said, voice low, but edged with sharpness. His eyes searched mine, not for a slip of gossip, but for evidence of a channel he hadn't mapped. "How do you know that?" The air thickened. Madison's face drained her practiced veneer, faltering. The fork in her hand scraped against porcelain with an ugly screech, betraying her nerves. For a fraction of a second, silence reigned, a silence that wasn't peace, but the kind that precedes collapse. The first fracture is quiet. The room stills when glass begins to separate. The second round of toasts shimmered to life, candles trembling along the long table as champagne flutes were refilled. A thin line of candlelight caught on one stem, hairline almost invisible, but enough to throw a glint that betrayed a flaw. Conversation hushed, then resumed with the careful pacing of people aware that something delicate hovered just beneath the surface. Madison raised her glass high, her voice polished, her smile rehearsed. To family, to futures, and to properties that actually matter. Old Oak. Honestly, it's B-tier real estate at best. The words landed soft in tone but jagged in meaning, each syllable crafted to diminish not just the house, but what it represented. I let silence stretch before speaking, the memory of the threshold tugging forward. "Funny," I said evenly. "The third brick by the step was crooked by 2 millimeters. I know because I said it myself with my father. It was our little imperfection, our truth." My gaze slid toward the doorway where shadows of the porch memory lingered. "And just last week, the camera above the eave recorded who decided to change it." A ripple passed down the table. Margaret coughed lightly as if to smother discomfort. Madison's expression flickered, and in the effort to maintain poise, she pressed too hard. "I told the workers to fix it for style." She snapped the words sharper, louder than she intended. The confession hung in the air, undeniable, her attempt at control, collapsing into admission. The candlelight caught the gleam of a small brass key beside my water, ignored by most, but not by Grant. "Tonight," I added to it. With deliberate calm, I slid a USB across the linen until it rested next to the key. The polished metal reflected amber glow as I spoke softly. "Pretty, but not true." Every eye turned first to me, then to the objects on the table, then instinctively toward Grant. His glass remained untouched, his focus fixed not on the family chorus but on the evidence silently demanding attention. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, he leaned closer to the USB, the weight of the room shifting toward him as if gravity itself had chosen sides. Sometimes all it takes is one question to split a room in two. The plates of dessert arrived with choreographed grace slices of layered cake, candied fruit arranged like a painter's final strokes. But no one lifted a fork. The air carried a brittle silence thick with what had just been said and what could no longer be unsaid. The USB gleamed faintly on the tablecloth, its presence heavier than any confection or toast. Grant shifted in his chair, leaning forward just enough that the chandeliers carved angles across his face. His voice cut the stillness clean. "That Gulfstream G800 at North Valley. Is it yours?" The effect was immediate. Forks froze, mid-air spoons hovered, even the candle flames seemed to halt in their flicker. The sound of the question reverberated louder in silence than any laughter had been all evening. Margaret's hand trembled against her glass stem. Madison's painted smile faltered, her eyes darting like trapped light. The family chorus, once a flood of chatter, was reduced to stunned stillness. I let the silence stretch until it became unbearable, savoring the fracture it carved through the long table. Then, with steady movement, I nudged the USB further across the linen. Its small metallic click was louder than crystal breaking. "This answer's better," I said, voice, even as though I were commenting on the weather. Grant picked it up with precise fingers, his expression unreadable but intent. Without asking, he turned toward the screen, mounted at the end of the dining room, originally installed for family slideshows, travel montages, curated nostalgia. He slid the USB into the port. The screen blinked, then filled with text and numbers, clean lines of registry data. FAA records unfolded in sterile black and white. Tail number VH. Owner VH Holdings. The initials were unmistakable. The air turned cavernous, a vacuum where denial had no room to hide. The chandelier light caught on pale faces, on frozen hands, on a tableau of disbelief. Margaret whispered something inaudible, more prayer than argument. Grant's gaze swept from the screen to me, then back to the table. The silence deepened into something ceremonial. And then, breaking it barely more than a breath, Madison whispered, "No. This can't be real." The screen glowed brighter than any chandelier. Lies looked smaller under its light. Every fork, every glass, every polished plate seemed suspended midair, caught between disbelief and inevitability. The family slideshow monitor, once meant to showcase vacations or graduations, now pulsed with the stark lettering of FAA filings. Tail number VH. Owner VH Holdings. No florals could soften that light. No toast could drown it. Grant broke the silence with the kind of certainty that only law and filings permit. "FAA records can't be forged," he said, his voice measured as though pronouncing not an opinion, but a sentence. His words didn't need volume, they carried weight enough. A hush rippled through the long table. Relatives leaned into each other, whispers flickering like sparks on dry wood. My name began to circle in the air. Victoria Hale. VH Holdings. Half question, half revelation. Some mouthed the connection slowly, as though tasting the syllables for the first time, unsure if they had ever known me at all. Madison shifted her expression, snapping into brittle disdain. "She must have borrowed it," she declared, laughing with a forced pitch. "A jet doesn't prove anything. People rent all kinds of toys for appearances." Her laugh clinked like glass on the verge of breaking. Margaret's tone cracked sharper than Madison's mockery. "Enough theatrics, Victoria." Her polished smile strained her eyes, cold steel beneath the chandelier's reflection. She wanted to snap the thread to end the moment before it unraveled further, but I didn't raise my voice. I simply met her gaze steady and unhurried, letting the silence expand so my words would land heavier. If you had cared to check, I said calm as breath, you wouldn't need to ask. The sentence struck with more force than any shout. It silenced even the murmurs, and for a moment all that could be heard was the hum of the projector. Then from halfway down the table an uncle's voice cut through, not hushed, but audible, carrying the unvarnished truth of the room. We've underestimated her. The words hung there more binding than any toast had ever been, and every face turned again toward the light of the screen, where denial had no shadow left to hide. Power feels different when you realize the quiet one already signed the checks. The dining room still hummed with the aftershock of the FAA record. Dessert plates sat untouched, sugar crystallizing in the silence, while candlelight threw uneasy shadows across anxious faces. Madison, desperate to reclaim footing, lifted her glass with a brittle smile that wavered at the corners. Her tone dripped with rehearsed triumph. Well, I'll soon be with Whitmore and Alder. That's real influence. They know where true talent belongs. She raised her chin as though announcing a coronation, inviting applause that did not come. I let her words hang weighted by their hollowness. Then, in a voice quieter than her boast but sharper in its precision, I replied, "They'll welcome you. I own 12%. The sound that followed was not silence but rupture. Gasps pulled air from the room chairs, scraped back involuntarily, and the collective breath of the table seemed to vanish. The chandelier's glow felt colder now, harsher, illuminating faces stretched between disbelief and reluctant recognition. Madison's glass trembled, her practiced composure crumbling. "That's impossible," she stammered, forcing a laugh that broke halfway through. "She's bluffing. Equity like that, nobody just hands it to." Grant's voice cut her down like steel on glass. "Board records list her with veto rights." His eyes were on me now, not with suspicion, but with a dawning respect edged with caution. He knew the weight of veto power. So did everyone in the room who had ever pretended to understand money. Madison's hand went slack, her fork clattering against porcelain. Her lips parted, the question trembling out of her like a final defense. "You mean you could stop me?" I let the pause stretch, savoring the way the room leaned closer, each relative caught in the gravity of the moment. Then I turned my gaze to her. Slow and sharp, my words deliberate and final. "Could already did." The chandelier above flickered once, as if acknowledging the shift, and the family who had long underestimated me now saw the truth. I was not waiting for their invitation. I had been holding the pen on their futures all along. When a crown breaks, it cuts the head that wore it. The chandelier trembled with the weight of silence, candle flames bending in the faint draft as if bracing for the storm gathering at the long table. Madison's veneer had cracked in front of them all, her boasting turned to hollow air, her certainty unraveling thread by thread. Her voice, once laced with smug confidence, now rose sharp and ragged, desperation piercing its edges. "At least I own old oak, the real Hale legacy. You can't take that from me." The declaration ricocheted against polished walls, but the words rang false to ears that had already begun doubting her. For the first time that evening, I didn't need to raise my voice to shatter her claim. I simply tilted my head, my tone level cool, deliberate correction. VH Holdings purchased it 6 months ago. The effect was immediate and merciless. The table gasped in unison, an audible intake of disbelief that made the chandeliers seem to sway. Margaret's hand flew to her chest, her practiced poise dissolving as color drained from her face. A murmur rippled among the relatives, fragments of shock tumbling. She bought it 6 months ago. Eyes darted from Madison to me, the balance of power visibly tipping. Grant's voice broke through quiet but certain, a reverent acknowledgement that carried farther than Madison's scream ever could. She bought her childhood back. It wasn't a statement of finance. It was recognition of reclamation of something Madison could never counterfeit. Madison's hands clenched, her composure fully abandoned. With a shriek, she slammed the table, crystal-rattling silverware clattering against porcelain. It was mine. The word tore from her throat as though she could still claw it back by sheer force of will. But the room no longer believed her. The crown she had paraded so proudly shattered at her own feet. I didn't flinch. I didn't need to. I let the echo of her outburst dissolve before speaking, my gaze locked to hers with steady precision. It was father's, I said, each word carved into silence. Then I leaned just enough that only inevitability stood between us. I simply kept his step in place. The flickering candlelight caught on her broken expression, and for the first time, the jury seated around that long table looked not at me as the outcast, but at Madison as the imposter. The crown had cut her, and the blood was invisible, but undeniable. Not every victory roars. Some echo best in silence. The dining room lay suspended in a hush so thick it seemed to muffle even the tick of the clock on the far wall. Dessert still gleamed untouched on porcelain plates, sugar crust stiffening in the heat of the chandelier, but no one dared move their fork. What had once been Madison's stage, curated polished set to her advantage, was now reduced to wreckage, a room where truth had stripped away performance. Grant was the first to pierce the silence, his words unexpected, measured, yet heavy with weight. I once quoted her risk report in a partner meeting. He admitted, his eyes flicking toward me before dropping to the table, as though confessing something too long concealed. The ripple it caused was subtle, but irreversible. Relatives shifted posture, straightening gazes, recalibrating. Where mockery had ruled, there was now a quiet, reluctant respect. Madison's lips moved soundlessly at first, then broke into a whisper of excuses, fragments about unfairness, timing, favoritism, that no longer convinced even herself. Beside her, Margaret attempted to rescue dignity, voice low, insisting the evening had gotten out of hand, that family dinners were no place for such displays. But her tone faltered, stripped of its command. The performance had collapsed, leaving only hollow gestures in its wake. I sat in the storm's calm center, unmoved, the air around me, steady as theirs fractured. I hadn't needed to raise my voice, hadn't needed theatrics or spectacle. The truth spoke louder than I ever could, and the power of restraint was sharper than any retort. Their scramble no longer reached me. It merely circled the drain of a dynasty's illusions. When the moment ripened, I leaned forward just enough that my words carried without strain. "I didn't come here to win," I said softly, every syllable cutting more than a shout could. "I came to remind myself I don't need to." The effect was final, not in volume but in certainty. Madison froze. Margaret wilted, the rest bowed in silence. Even Grant, whose gaze lingered longest, nodded once, almost imperceptibly in acknowledgement. I rose, then the chair, sliding back with a scrape against a marble so sharp it rang like a gavel strike. The sound reverberated through the hollow air, not a roar, but a verdict sealed, irreversible, and echoing longer than any applause. The same door that once shut in my face I now open without asking. The foyer glowed with the faint light of sconces, shadows bending long across polished stone, as if even the house itself leaned to witness. My hand hovered near the brass handle, the chill of the November night, pressing faintly against the wood, whispering through the cracks like an invitation from the outside world. Behind me, the air was weighted with silence, the kind that clings after too many truths have been spoken, too many illusions shattered. Victoria Margaret's voice cracked through the stillness, thin, brittle, stripped of its usual polish. "Don't walk away." Her plea seemed smaller than the echoes in the hall, less an order, more a desperate tether cast across a gulf already too wide. She looked different now, shoulders bent, eyes flickering with a mix of fear and recognition. I did not turn fully. My reflection in the glass of the door was enough, tall, steady, no longer framed by the roles they once assigned me. My voice carried back over my shoulder, low and resolute. I already walked away years ago. The words felt final, not heavy, but free, as though I was confirming something both of us had always known. From the dining room chairs shifted. Grant rose, not hurried, not hesitant, but with the composure of a man recognizing a verdict already delivered. He did not move to block me, nor to coax me back. Instead, he approached quietly, his presence, deliberate, steady, a silent escort. His eyes met mine for a moment, not with pity, not with surprise, but with respect. That single look marked the closing of a circle, the acknowledgement denied to me for decades now given without a word. The door creaked softly as it swung outward, the cold night air rushing in with a sweep that tasted of liberation, bracing and real. The warmth of the house receded, instantly replaced by the clarity of the world beyond. It was not exile, it was choice carved by my own hands. Crossing the threshold, my heel tapped once against the stone step I had set with my father so many years ago. They had paved over the memory, but they could not erase it. It lived in me, and now it propelled me forward. I turned just enough to let my final words cut clean through the air. Where I go, I am welcomed. The night wrapped around me as I stepped fully outside. The chill carried no sting, only promise. And then, from beyond the trees, a low roar began to rise, a jet engine warming in the distance, steady, certain, waiting. The sound folded into the silence I left behind, a reminder, a vow, a symbol. I had built my own chair, and it carried me wherever I chose to go. Beneath the glittering chandeliers and fractured loyalties, the truth finally claimed its seat at the table, and those who had mocked were left silent in its light. The story of betrayal and silence overturned revealed a deeper truth, that justice does not arrive by invitation, but by courage that refuses to be erased. When injustice is met with unwavering resolve, even the cruelest facade collapses, leaving only the strength of what endures. Like a door once locked, now opening wide, the triumph of truth proved that no crown built on lies can last forever. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Type 1 if you felt the same fire of justice, or 2 if you think it could have gone further.